Hello and welcome to True North EV. My name is James. I'm here today chatting with Ken from EV Revolution, the show, the podcast. He's kind of done it all. He's been on YouTube for, I believe he said we're going on 6 years. It's since the beginning of the Model 3. So without further ado, here's Ken. Hello and welcome to True North EV, Ken. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks very much for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming here. Um, I'm sure most of my audience has probably heard of you, probably seen a show or two that you've been on. But just to get to know you a little bit, for those that haven't, what was the first electric vehicle you wanted and why?
Well, thanks for those kind words, and I'm hoping that some people have heard or seen of me. Um, yeah, let's start with some history. So my first EV actually was a 2018 Nissan Leaf, the 40 kilowatt hour version.
Nice.
And I got into that actually following EVs in 2016, where I came across, of course, Tesla's announcement of the Model 3 reveal that was happening in March of that year. And and prior to just that, I think it probably was in January of that year, 2016. I remember reading a newspaper article. Yes, they were still printing at that time, and it was something about incentives for electric cars and like $11,000 or something here in Ontario. And I said, "What's all this about?" So started to investigate a bit and saying, "Well, what the province is giving some incentives if I buy a car, money off a price. Hey, that's interesting." And so I started to kind of just look a little bit at some of the older Leafs and just to get some knowledge out there. And then when I watched the Tesla reveal, that really kind of hooked me in. That was the big gotcha moment for me, where a capable range vehicle at a more affordable price than Teslas were known for, just kind of just sucked me right into the whole movement.
Nice. And so you started with the Nissan Leaf, but I know you don't currently have the Nissan Leaf, or do you still
Correct.
have the Nissan Leaf?
No, I don't now. So, actually, I started getting into the YouTube business after that Tesla reveal to cover with Trevor Page of the Model 3 Owners Club, which is now Tesla Owners Online, I believe he
Yeah.
goes by. And my goal was always to talk about the global market, and we'll get to my show later on. But in saying that, I did put my $1,000 down on a Model 3, after the event. In fact, I watched the reveal the next day, so it wasn't. Well, I didn't watch it live. Put my $1,000, got excited, and started to follow the industry, get into YouTube, all this stuff. And then in 2018, early 2018, when the Model 3s were going to start shipping to Canada, they were going to be delayed a bit, and it was only the most expensive model that was coming to Canada at that time, the first well, basically in all of 2018, and we knew that the provincial incentives at the time were $14,000, so quite hefty. Were going to go away with a government change. We knew that the Ford government was going to come in September, and their platform was getting rid of that incentive program quite vocally. So I started looking around in the January, February, March, April timeframe of 2018. I test drove everything that was out there available, the i3, the Bolt, of course, the Nissan, the Ioniq, the regular Ioniq. I think maybe the Kona, if I'm not mistaken, if it was out in 2018. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, we test drove all of them and decided on the Leaf because I couldn't afford the top spec Model 3 at the time. So put a down payment on a Leaf, got that about 3 months later. Took a little bit of time even to get the Leaf at the time, and drove that for just over 2 years and put over 45,000 kilometers on it. And it was a fantastic vehicle. Absolutely loved it. Had no issues with it. Just I needed a bit more range. So I had always had at the back of my mind that at some point I was either going to get another all electric or replace the Leaf with a longer range vehicle.
And so right now you currently have the Tesla Model 3 or the
Correct.
Model
Model 3 long range, yeah, all-wheel
Okay.
drive. So I got that in September of 2020, and I was sad to see the Leaf go, but it went to a good home. So that I know that. And like I said, it was a great car. Just 40 kilowatts is what it is. And I'm in my real job is IT sales. That's what I do for a living. So my territory is Windsor to Ottawa to Sudbury and kind of that swath. mainly around the GTA, but the GTA has grown, as you know. The GTA includes Hamilton, Hydro, Hamilton and Niagara, and Guelph and Kitchener, even Woodstock now out to London that far. I mean, it's quite the swath. So in the wintertime, 40 kilowatts is a little bit challenging at times to get around. So and Tesla was always again something that I was hoping to get to eventually, and then was in a better position at the time with equity in my vehicle because, as you know, used EVs are pretty pretty good right now. With equity in the vehicle, which is something you don't see too much in vehicles, I was able to swing it and get into the Model 3 long range, and I've had that since September 2020.
Nice. And yeah, I know me and my wife actually put down our $1,000 on the Model 3 also, and actually
Mhm.
watched it live, did the whole $1,000, and then we started doing measurements, and basically it was a short vehicle. My wife was expecting at the time, and it's
Mhm.
like, that might be a little too short for us. So now we have a Hyundai Kona electric.
Nice.
Um, but what did you have before you got an electric vehicle? What was your last, I guess, ICE vehicle?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at the time, we actually had two Nissan Versas. We had two almost identical 2009, I believe they were 2008 Nissan Versas. So and sorry, and then we got a Nissan Sentra. So we actually had I'm just trying to think. Yeah, no, we had two cars and we got rid of one of the Versas for a Sentra. So we had two Nissan products. We had Nissan for quite a few years, and that was just luck of the draw. It wasn't a purposeful decision. We just my wife got one. We got one used, like one of the dealer demos back in 2010, I think it was, and then I got one in 2012, which was a few year old used one, but it was a done up one. It was one of the rarer ones that you don't find with body kits and stuff. And just because they were so easy to work on, they were really good on gas and they were very economical and quite roomy. You talk about roominess, the way they design those and like the Versa notes and stuff is pretty cavernous inside for the class of vehicle it is. So we had that. Then we got a Nissan Sentra, changed one of them out to a Nissan Sentra for my wife, and that's what we had when we ended up getting the first Leaf.
Nice. Actually, right before chatting with you, I'm actually looking at a 2012 Nissan Leaf. That's just our second vehicle because of how much bigger it even is than my Kona. It's
Mm-hmm.
really great for storage and whatnot. Um, Now, switching over from your Nissan Versa to your Nissan Leaf, did you find that you had to really change much of your driving style, or was it a pretty easy switch over?
I would say, from a ergonomic and functional, vehicle functionality perspective, the cockpit and everything, it was fairly straightforward because it still had the Nissan design language and the touches and, the buttons, if it was labeled this picture, it kind of meant the same thing, for the most part in vehicles. So that whole thing carried over, which was easy. I've owned like over 30 cars in my lifetime. I lost track now. So all kinds of different vehicles from British to American to whatever. And so I'm pretty easy to get into a vehicle, spend a couple of minutes and figure out where everything is and get going on it. And this was not very challenging for my wife or daughter. In fact, our daughter really likes the Nissan design, the ergonomics of those and the feeling. So she was quite happy with that vehicle as well. Our daughter didn't take long. It was a matter of now this is electric, so I got to think a little bit different. If I'm going longer routes, I have to plan a little bit more. Especially a few years ago, where we were still building up charging infrastructure, and 40 kilowatts is only good for so much, especially in the winter. So there is that planning element to it. But otherwise, I looked at it as I just want to get in, press the start button and go and not worry about efficiency and, kilowatt per 100 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers or whatever. I didn't want to worry about any of that stuff. Now, I did buy Leaf Spy and I did put an OBD2 so I could really track the temperatures. And I really got into meeting people that were into the Leaf and to dig down because that's just the way I am. But I think for listeners, who are thinking of an EV, you don't need to, and that's one thing I really encourage the OEMs to do is build these vehicles so that they are simple. Just get in and go. So there's no key, but otherwise, there's really no difference. Get in and go, plug it in at night, and you're ready to rinse and repeat the next day.
Yeah, very true. I know even with the Kona, I had to get it's called an EVOBD2.
Hmm.
It's actually made by a gentleman in Quebec, just
Oh.
because all I wanted with the Kona was my range and percentage. That's it. And so I
Hmm.
got it. It tells me all the battery temperatures and everything, but it's like Just give me a range and percentage. And if the manufacturers would give us some sort of flexibility,
Mhm.
then it would be much better. But
Excellent. Yeah, one thing
you,
with the Leaf, I was just gonna add one thing with the Leaf. If I had another vehicle, I probably wouldn't have worried about a third-party app and that connectivity. But with the Leaf, with the passive cooling and everything going on, it's a little bit more interesting to follow what's going on with the battery, especially on hot summer days and if you're doing a lot of rapid charging and stuff. So it was worth getting. But I can tell you, in that 2 years and that 45,000 kilometers, I think I only saw about 6 or 7% battery degradation, and most of that was in the first year, which is typical. So it had a ton of life in them, and it was zero. I always tell people it was zero emissions, zero issue vehicle. It really
yeah,
was just get in and go.
nice. And what's the longest trip you've done in an EV? That's with any. I know
Yeah.
with your experience, you've been in a multitude of them, but
Yeah, so a couple, because I am part of AJAC, I do get some press fleet vehicles. So I did do a trip on a Jaguar I-Pace from here to Ottawa and back, which was great. But that wasn't the longest. The longest was a personal vacation that we did actually last summer. Last August, we went from here to Fredericton, New Brunswick and back. And we did a little bit of exploring around New Brunswick, down to Bay of Fundy and the typical tourist traps, even under partial COVID restrictions. It wasn't that bad. So, we did a little bit of traveling. And one thing that Tesla makes is, because of they built it first, before they started selling cars or when they first came out with the Model S's, is that supercharging network. And it is pretty brilliant because it is proprietary. So it's to them. And they integrate it so well with their vehicles, with the nav, and with the predictive analysis that the nav gives you, telling you that to go from here to this supercharger, you'll use up approximately this much battery. You'll have this much battery life when you charge when you get there, and you'll need to charge for 20 minutes to get to this state of charge before you can go again to your next stop. They're really good at that route planning and including the charging elements in that because they can, because it's their network. They get the data. They know. They're not telling you that if you're going to plug into Electrify Canada or something else. But even though we can on Chatamo, but that's nobody really does it. So using the supercharging network, the whole charging experience was basically very easy. I route planned the first half of the journey out to the East Coast, and then I stopped doing that because I said I'm just going to rely on the computer to tell me what to do. Plug in the map, and it tells you what to do, and it's within a couple percent correct of its estimates. So they have a really good system for road tripping. And the good thing is that more and more other manufacturers, especially that support faster charge speeds, like the 800-volt architectures from the Koreans and the Germans on some of their vehicles, and ultra fast charging capabilities of 200 plus for sustained. The Audis and the Porsches can hold 150 for a long time. We're starting to see that experience catch up in the other brands as well.
so I guess just as a Tesla owner, I just as guess feedback.
Mhm.
What's your thoughts on them opening the superchargers up to non-Teslas?
Yeah, personally, I'm not that concerned about it because they do continue to build more superchargers and revamp them, especially if they're going to increase power to some of them. Um, Tesla, I think we all have to remember that Tesla is not a charity. They are not here to make the world a better place by giving everything away, right? They are a business that need to make money and be profitable in order to do what they need to do. And though Elon's ambitions are noble, and he's been a big catalyst for the way that the EV industry has moved these last 5 to 6 years. Again, I would say the Model 3 is probably a tipping point there, the reveal. They are in a company to make money and be profitable. They have shareholders now to answer to, blah, blah, blah. So opening up, adding another source of revenue for the supercharger network that they continue to maintain and fund, and it's an expensive proposition, is a sound business decision. So I get why they're doing that. I'm really not that concerned if I get somewhere and it's kind of full, because my understanding is they won't be opening up all of them. I think there'll be certain stalls and they'll be capped at certain limits. So they'll make it basically designed so that I'm dying, I'm at 2%. Where do I go? Well, I'm next to a supercharger, so let me plug in for 10 minutes there so that then I can go to a proper level 3 that, CCS most likely, and get my 150 kilowatt charge or whatever. But I'll suck 50 kilowatts for 10 minutes just to get me there kind of thing. I think that that's the idea that Elon and company are looking to do when they open this up. But of course, a lot of Tesla owners throw their hands up and say no, they're going to be waiting in long lines. But we already are waiting in lines on that trip to New Brunswick. There was one station that I had to wait in line because there was a problem with the stall. So Tesla's not perfect, and it was busy, so I had to wait to get in, and then it was slow charging. So because it was so busy, so these things happen. But I was talking to somebody last night, about charging experience, and they said, "Well, I don't want to sit there for an hour and 15. If there's a problem, I got to wait. Like that really sucks." And I said, "Well, yeah, it does, but I mean, there are lineup at gas stations, and I get so like we do still have another internal combustion vehicle car at home here. We have a Versa Note, so sometimes I'll go out and get gas when the price drops, 3 or 5 cents, right? My wife will go, "Oh, it just dropped, run, fill it up." And there'll be a lineup. And I hate sitting in gas lines more than I hate sitting in, I don't mind the charger lines. But then think of the cost, right? So, okay, so I have to sit here maybe for another half hour longer than I normally would. But I'm saving so much money in the long run, right? Even that fast charge might cost me 12 to 15 bucks, let's say, to get me, another 80%, 85%. Whereas with gas now, I don't know what it is in Manitoba, but it's pushing 160, and change here now.
Yeah, we're at 150.
Yeah.
I only know because of my work truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite impressive filling that
So,
up.
I just say, like, what's that worth to you? If is half an hour worth saving 20 bucks, let's say, on gas, what the equivalent would be
Yeah.
on gas? I don't know, right?
Yeah, and I as a slower charger with a Kona,
Yeah.
I was used to just I would drive for 2 hours, sit for an hour.
Hmm.
I did 20 hours in one day, and I actually felt way more awake
Yeah.
than at the end of that 20 hours than when I would power through with our Honda Insight and just stop enough for gas, go through a drive-through for
That's
food,
it.
and go. Yeah.
And go. Yeah. No, you make a great point. The relaxation is also there on that trip. We took actually my wife's father and brother with us, and that's the first time they've ever gone in an EV on a long trip too. They didn't know what to expect because he's got a diesel GMC SUV, which will get 900 kilometers on a tank. So he said, "Oh, let's just take the diesel." I said, "No, no, no. Let's take. We're going in my Model 3. If you guys want to come with us, fine. If you want to drive your car, fine, do it. But we're going to stop. This is where roughly we're going to stop, and we're going to stay in Quebec City overnight, just so that I don't try to do the whole trip in an 18-hour trip in 20 hours kind of thing, because I'm too old for that." And they were really worried about that experience. Gee, we're going to sit here for an hour and a half every stop, and our average stop was about 20 minutes. By the time he said, "Okay, go to the wash, go get a coffee," they'd do that. They'd come back and chomp it on a donut. I said, "Okay, we're ready to go." They go, "What? You're ready to go already?" Like, so, and it wasn't every single time, but the average overall was about 20 minutes. So, you know, the infrastructure's there. Again, it depends on what your needs are from an owner, what your use case, what you need to do. But for the majority of EVs that people are using, and if you have the accessibility to home charging, even as you said, as a secondary vehicle, they are a wonderful option. In fact, if I were, one day we are going to buy a second car because our daughter will eventually move out and get her own place and do that. But it's probably going to be electric because, like, why would I, for just a secondary vehicle to go to the grocery store or go 20, 30 kilometers a day? Like, why would I buy a gas car for that? Makes no sense.
Well, and with an electric vehicle, you don't have as much concerns about it being used. Did they get the oil change done?
Right.
Did the timing belt get done? It's what do the tires look like? What do the brakes look like? Okay, it's good.
Hmm.
Battery, I guess battery condition depending on how far you need to go with it, but like I'm looking at a 2012 and I do about 20 kilometers a day. It's like
Yeah.
I don't care what the battery's like.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. No, it's
um,
a great point. It is a different way to view that used car market as well.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I guess on the Model 3, what would you say the worst feature of it would be for yourself?
Oh, that's an easy one, the suspension. For
A
me,
little too stiff?
way too stiff. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I could live with it, but for carrying passengers, when I first got the Model 3, and just to set the stage, my driving dynamics are pretty reserved. So I run the Model 3 in chill mode, which means that I reduce the amount of power that, the acceleration on it on purpose. And I run it on low regen because I don't want the true one pedal, the aggressive regen. I want it a little looser. And I don't mind using the brake for the last little bit if I have to. I don't mind that. The goal is to try to get a most comfortable ride as possible for, especially when there's passengers in the vehicle. But I do drive normal speeds and all this kind of stuff. And the first complaint every time somebody got in the back seat after driving for 10 or 15 minutes is, I'm car sick. Like, can you stop? I got to get some fresh air. Every single person that got in the back seat. Now, maybe it's just because my family is a little bit more prone to it, but I'm thinking, well, what can I do? Because this is a car I'm keeping for 10 years. Like, I'm driving this thing into the ground. So, that's true Canadian, right? We'll throw some duct tape at it and keep it going. So what can I do? And it's funny that you asked that question as well, because when Trevor and I were still doing the Model 3 channel, we put together the first public video review of the Model 3 shortly after delivery started in 2017
I
in
remember that
like
video.
October.
Top secret video.
Top secret, yeah. We had to actually hold on to it for about a month before we released it. So we went down to a secret location in the U.S. We interviewed one of the first non-Tesla employees to get this. We spent 2 days with the vehicle, and the first thing I said when I got in that car and started driving it is, boy, this is pretty stiff, the suspension, and it's louder than I thought it would be. But you know, I've never had a vehicle with frameless windows, so I get the frameless windows thing. There's going to be a little bit of noise. So the suspension for sure is the worst part to me of the Model 3. And what did I do for that? Last year I put in a Mountain Pass Performance kit. These guys are based here in King City outside Toronto, but they ship everywhere. They order from KW Germany. They're built to spec kits, and I got their comfort kit, not the sport one, because the Model 3 handles like it's on rails. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful handling car, but it's stiff. And I got the comfort kit just to soften the ride up a little bit, give the rebound a little bit nicer, softer touch so it's not so aggressive and jarring. And that's made a world of difference. It's still bumpier than I'd like it to be, but that's just the nature of the 3 and the Y without, air suspension.
And do you find after doing that suspension switch, is the car sickness a lot less now for those that had the
Gone. It was night
gone?
and day. Gone.
See,
Yeah.
uh,
It was night and day. And again, because you're sitting in the back seat, you're more away from the center point of like a seesaw, right? If you're sitting in the center of that seesaw going back and forth, you're not probably not going to get as sick as if you're sitting on one of the ends, right? Where you're going way up and down, if you use that analogy. So the driver is kind of at the center, but the rear passengers are more towards that end, right, of that seesaw. So they feel those ups and downs a lot more than the driver does. It's a lot more attenuated and extended. And the suspension kit took that jarness away. You cushioned the rebound a little bit nicer to make it a little bit softer, so it wasn't as jarring and up and down. I'm bouncing in my seat for your listeners that can't see us, but that's a sensation. Now, again, that's not everybody. A lot of people don't care. They haven't complained about it. It's just my use case with my family, and because that's important to me on how they feel, I decided to spend the money. But I do wish that Tesla, and you watch a lot of reviews on, people will say, we'll talk about the suspension being too stiff. And I believe that for a luxury vehicle that Tesla's going after, that market space, the suspension should be a little bit nicer. But they're in the business to make money, and they're young and hungry as a car company. So I get it. They not cutting corners, they just put other stuff in there that don't cost as much as other things could.
well, I think they're going after that sporty luxury
Mhm.
crowd that don't care about the suspension being stiff. It's I want it
Right.
to be fast and
Yeah.
but like I know I grew up my family always had the 1980s boats that it just you
Hmm.
float on air. So yeah,
Yeah.
once you get into a stiff suspension car, it kind of kills your back and whatnot without the proper seats.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I'm older now than I used to be. So, I mean, when I was young, I had an 81 Camaro Z28, black gold T-bar roofs. I mean, I love that car. I had a 351 Cougar XR7 with a big V8. I mean, I've had Datsun 260s, Triumph TR7s. I mean, the whole full gamut of the map. Mustangs. I mean, I've been all over the place. Imports. I was chipping imports during the Fast and Furious days there with those movies. I got into that crowd doing some stuff, so it was all fun. But I'm kind of beyond that, and EVs, they have more power than you basically need. Even your Kona, even my Leaf with
Oh
a
yeah.
my ex-Leaf there with a 0 to 60 time of 7.5 seconds or whatever, it was plenty fast to get me up to highway speed, pull out past a truck on a 2-lane road. I never had an issue once with that vehicle to get out of trouble.
Yeah, as I've told others, my only issue with the Kona is the tires. I
Hmm.
can keep it in eco mode,
Yeah,
and I just have to let the little kids in their Hondas initially take the light, and
yeah,
then I see them in my mirror.
that's it. That's it.
Um,
Yeah, because of the weight of the EVs, we
yeah.
do chew through tires for sure.
Now to be opposite, what's the best feature of your Model 3?
Yeah. So good question again. I would say in this case, I do like the looks of it. They grew on me a little bit, but the integration with the technology, right? They're really doing some great things that nobody has quite caught up to yet. So as I talked about earlier, the supercharger integration, I mean, that is really, really slick, right? To be able to just nav, and you can now add waypoints, and the continual improvement, that over the air, they're the ones that started that push. Now everybody's offering some form of OTA, whether it's just the nav system or something. OEMs are really getting into that, and a lot of them are doing similar to what Tesla does, to be able to add features to the vehicle so that, like you and I, as we get older, the vehicle gets better, right? Like a fine wine kind of thing. I've got features on my Model 3 now that I didn't have a year and a half ago when I bought it, when I purchased it, which is great. I didn't have to go in, I didn't have to spend money to add whatever, like blind spot cameras being turned on now, which the Ionic has, and some of the Kia products. The GV60 has it. All these things where you put your left signal on, and the left side camera shows up on your binnacle. Well, Tesla's now put that feature in. It didn't cost me any hardware, didn't cost me any money to do it. All of a sudden, 1 minute it's there, 1 minute it wasn't there. Now it is. So I think that integration with technology, and the power that it does to be able to change the features and enhance that vehicle over time is probably my best and favorite part of the Tesla vehicle. There's a lot, but that's probably it. Knowing that, wow, I mean, they can do so much because it is such um, a vehicle that relies so much on software, right? It's almost more software than car. um, it's amazing the stuff they can do, and everybody else is now looking to copy or better them in their vehicles. Like OTA is now a standard buzzword, where 3 or 4 years ago, go, what's that, what's OTA, like what is that? So
Well, yeah, I know with my 2019 Kona, I think I've gone in probably about 5, 6 times for different recalls that were basically just software upgrades, where it's like,
okay,
"Just let me do it at home. I'll
yeah,
do it on my Wi-Fi." Saves me the 3, 4 hours of
yeah,
coming to the dealership waiting for it.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's nice that you got some feature upgrades, that you got some tweaks to your vehicle to make
no,
it
they're not
better, right?
feature upgrades, though. They were actually just because of this battery recall.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so,
Yeah, no problem.
um
It happens. I mean, there was one recall I had to do in my Leaf, and it was a voluntary. It was something to do with a grounding plate, so I just had to take it to the dealer, sit there for an hour, and then go home. That was the only time throughout the
yeah.
whole just over 2 years that I had to do anything like that.
Oh, yeah, as listeners on my podcast will know, I really like my Kona. I really dislike Hyundai Canada right now. Um,
Okay,
it's
I'm gonna
I
have to
have
work on getting fixing that for you. So
well, it's Hyundai America. I chat with people in the
yeah,
States with the Kona issue,
yeah,
and Hyundai America is all about communication about it. Hyundai Canada doesn't the communication part is the lacking. It's
okay,
I worked in the auto industry. I know stuff happens.
yep,
Just the communication. Um,
I agree with you.
uh, but now that it's winter and hopefully winter's done soon, um, what's the worst part of your Model 3 in the winter?
Um, I would just say probably like every EV, the range loss, it can be significant, just like everybody else's. I mean, Tesla does have one of the best battery management systems on the planet. Again, we have to recall that they started, I mean, all they do is all electric vehicles. So they should be experts in building all electric vehicles. They've been doing it now for over 10 years. So they kind of got it right, and they built a good niche. So they do have a really good system. But even with a system as good as that, you can still get your 30-40% range loss when it gets cold. Even maybe half when we're into the minus 30s and this kind of stuff, and the car's sitting outside for a day or whatever. So that would probably be the only one. But I mean, their predictive range tends to fluctuate a little bit. Sometimes they're a little on the happy side, on a little bit more conservative side than they should be. I find with some of the German vehicles, because I do test other vehicles, they tend to be a bit more accurate. They'll say, well, we're not going to tell you got 400 kilometers, or really you got 350. So we'll just tell you right now you got 350. And you go, wow, I only got 350. But as you drive, you're going down a click at a time, or two, depending on the temps. Everybody takes some hit. So that would probably be the only thing. The driving dynamics in the Tesla, even though it's a low vehicle, like many other all electrics, are really good because of that low center of gravity and that extra weight that the batteries have, which is a good and a bad thing. Bad for range, but good for handling and other things. And we had a recent snowstorm. Well, we had one last night, but we had one even worse almost a month ago now that hit us on a Monday, where we got, I think, about close to 40 or 50 centimeters in just a few hours. It was a pretty large amount of snow. And I tried to go into my work that morning, and I had no problems going. The problem was, A, there were people all over the road getting stuck and blocking things, and B, the police were shutting down roads that I was trying to use to get to my work, because it was too much and nobody could keep up. If it hadn't been for that, I would have been able to make it to work. And a good example is, I said, after an hour of trying to get to work, I said, I'm just going to turn around and go home. So I turned up this road with two SUVs in front of me to go up this probably 10-degree hill, maybe 150 feet incline, at about a 9 or 10-degree incline. The two SUVs in front of me both got stuck about a third of the way up. One veered off to the left, one veered off to the right. Nobody was coming down the hill. I stopped. The guy on the right was trying to putter around to get his SUV out of the way. And after a couple of minutes, I rolled down my window. I said, "Look, can you back up, please, so I can try to get by?" Because they were both blocking the road like a wedge. And he says, "Oh, you're not going to be able to get up here." I said, "Can I try at least?" So he backs up, and I just go. Now I have an all-wheel drive Model 3 with a really good set of snow tires, but I was amazed without having to really try hard that this vehicle just plowed through everything, and I made it home easy.
Nice. And yeah, that's the best parts of, especially with the heated floor, essentially,
Yeah,
in in the winter. Um,
exactly.
and I guess that kind of relates to what's the best part of having an EV in the winter?
Well, the instant heat is pretty well there. Again, those handling characteristics, right? You don't have to let the car run for 5 minutes to get some heat and warm up. It pretty well comes instantaneously, and again, obviously, you can use the remote functions, which a lot of cars have remotes. I mean, remote start is nothing new; it's been around a long time. But you can't start your car if it's parked in a garage and you want to warm it up. So having the ability to precondition and while you're plugged in, I'm leaving at 7 in the morning. I want my car to be at 22 degrees. By the time I come out at 7, the car is at 22 degrees and it's ready to go. So you can't do that with internal combustion vehicle inside your garage, or you shouldn't do that. Let me rephrase that. It's not healthy for anybody, and it could be breaking the law. But anyway, so the instant heat and that handling characteristics, and even though mine's an all-wheel drive, I can tell you this is the first all-wheel drive car I've ever owned. I've only owned either front wheel or rear-wheel drive cars. And like I said, I've been driving for a long time, over 40 years, and I've never ever had an issue, even with big snow, with any of those vehicles. If I didn't have good tires, then it was on me. And if I drove like a nutcase, then that was on me. But if you drive wisely, and then obviously there are some weather conditions where just don't bother going out, like it's just a bit too much. Whether it's rear wheel or front wheel, you figure out how those vehicles drive, and you learn to adapt your driving skills around that. So throw some extra weight in the back if it's a rear, you get the pull sensation in the front. So and good tires help. So I'm lucky that I have an all-wheel drive, but even if it was rear wheel, I would still love it just as much.
And yeah, and that's the best part. Front wheel drive on my Kona is not so great.
Hmm.
Just because, well, the weight shift. But yeah, it's
Problem.
how did you get into, I guess, well, I guess it wasn't called the EV revolution at first? With you
Correct.
and Trevor,
That's
you
right.
guys, was it Tesla Model 3 group? Was
Yeah.
that the YouTube channel initially, or?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. So after I had watched the reveal and put my money down, I got excited and like all of us, we type things into the internet and we get all these things that pop back in a search and started to read everything that I could about the Model 3 and all these chats and forums and stuff. Just people were going nuts and came across Trevor's forum, which is his Model 3 forum, and started asking some questions because he was pretty delightful. And then I saw that he lives just outside of Toronto, so I reached out to him and said, "Look, I used to do audio podcasting for another community group, so I'm familiar with even what we're doing right now. I had the gear and everything." I said, what do you think about if we start doing an audio podcast to help build the awareness about the Model 3 and EVs in a sense of community? And he said, yeah, I'd love to do that because I've got this forum and it's starting to go crazy. And he loves Tesla. So we got together and then we decided that instead of doing audio, let's go right to video. And YouTube is a free medium. We can use that. He has some editing skills and some camera skills. I have the organizational skills and the ability to put some material for shows together. And that's how we started. We just started to record. He would come to my house. We recorded in my basement. I bought some gear to set up a basic recording studio, and off we went. And the premise was always that it would be mainly focused on Tesla Model 3 news, but even from the first episode I wanted to bring in other news because I felt that the EV industry is much more than just one brand or one region, right? It has to be in order for us to make the change because my main reason for getting the lead, for getting into this is environmental. That's my driver. Yeah, I'm saving money on fuel and I love the experience and all the other positives that EVs give you, but my main motivator for me was zero emissions, right? What can I do as a consumer to help our environment? Like I try to compost, I try to recycle, we try to do what we can, and there's very limited things that we as consumers have control of in areas that actually directly impact climate change and our greenhouse gas emissions. I can't control how cement is made, but I know it's one of the big polluters for greenhouse gas emissions. So what can I take control of? And a vehicle purchase and what I drive is a big part of that. So that was my motivator. And I wanted to kind of take that slant to other people to say, EVs are coming, they're good, this is why, to take that education and awareness out with Trevor. And we started doing that show in, I think, May of 2016.
Okay. And so were you a car guy then before, or just an environmental, uh, just trying to be environmentally
Yeah.
responsible?
Yes, a car guy trying to be environmentally responsible. Yeah. I mean, when you get a family and you get older, you start thinking of these things. When you're 20, you don't really think about them too much for the most sake, right? We're too busy still growing up. So, but once you get a little older and these things start to become more instance. And, this last decade, we've seen quite the shift in climate change in the proof that there is real science and that there are real impacts about it. Some people even listeners may still doubt it, but there is something going on. And whether it's cyclical or it's a natural phenomenon, it doesn't really matter. The point is that something is happening now. What can we do to lessen the impact, right? We may not be able to make it go away totally, but what can we do to lessen the impact so that we can keep this planet as livable as we can and habitable? That's how I look at it. So don't worry about where it came from or whose fault. What can we do now and moving forward to fix it or to help the situation? And one of the areas is driving a zero emission vehicle. So that was kind of my take on it. We did that channel for a couple of years, grew it to about 45,000 or so subs. But I'd always said to Trevor during the meantime, look, I want to do more content on non-Tesla. And he's a big Tesla guy and he wanted to stick with more Tesla content. So I said, look, let's start another channel, which we'll do it together for a few episodes and then I'll take it over. And that'll be my thing because that's the pathway I want to go down. And he wants to continue to promote EV adoption through Tesla and through that mechanism, which is great because they are the leading still in sales manufacturer.
And we need really
Yeah,
promoters of all brands, whether it be
Yep,
Tesla, GM, whatever.
for
Uh,
sure.
so yeah, I guess you guys kind of started 3 years ago. Just looking at got your page up now.
Yeah, I think the first episode was May of 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So, if my mind serves me correct, because it was a while ago. And then I started my EV Revolution show in April of 20, I want to say 19. So this is going on 3 years for me this April.
Yeah, and that's probably what
Correct.
this one is
Yep.
going by.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess, did you think about joining AJAC, or for those that might not actually understand the acronym, what is it? The Association or Automotive Journalists Association of Canada.
You got it.
Um, were you wanting to join them to help further EV revolution? Did you want to join them before, or do they have no real connection but actually work together?
Great question. So my motivation for joining AJAC was how can what's going to help me spread the word? What's going to help me tell consumers what's out there from an EV standpoint? Because that's the basis of my channel is about education and awareness, right? So I my channel is not a business for me. It's a part-time. I do it for the cause. Yeah, I have a little bit of Patreon. There's a little bit of YouTube, but if you know anybody on YouTube, you got to have a whole whack of subscribers and a ton of stuff going on to make any money on YouTube. And I've, like I said, a real full-time busy job that I've been doing for a long, long time. So I'm not changing my career anytime soon to this, but I'm passionate about getting the message out, and YouTube is a great medium because it is free to do. So in order for me to be able to explain to consumers the choices that are out there for vehicles, I need to get access to those vehicles so that I can look at them, try them out, and provide an informed opinion and analysis of that vehicle. And AJAC was the mechanism, or is the mechanism, to help me do that. So that's one reason is to get access to vehicles that I normally wouldn't get access to if I wasn't a member. But the other and probably more important reason is because I do take this seriously from a non-objective journalist perspective. I'm not a journalist by trade, but I try to be as open as possible when I'm looking at things, to show the good things and the bad things, and to provide a balanced reporting on whatever it is that I'm talking about. And AJAC gives me that credibility because I want to stay within that realm. I want to be, treated as a journalist, because I am a journalist. It just happens to be video instead of writing or something else. And I want to be taken seriously in my reporting, that I'm not just, somebody who's a fan of a certain model that's out there doing a YouTube channel because they want, to get famous, and they want likes and all this stuff in social media. That's not my motivating. It's my motivation is, to get people to think about EVs and to make those choices to get into an EV, preferably all electric, but there are some good plug-in hybrids out there too that can work. And that's where I'm about. My motto is getting rid of tailpipes one mind at a time. And that's right. It's talking to that one person. And if they're totally against it, that's fine. Go on to the next person that might be open to think about it. So that to me is why EJAC is important, because it gives me that credibility that I'm doing this for the seriousness that I believe it is.
Awesome. And I like the fact knowing a journalist actually has experience with electric vehicles, where, well, you get the opinion columns and all that of
Hmm.
how EVs aren't going to
Yep.
work. Um,
Yep.
and actually, maybe it's because I did telemarketing when I was young. The ones that say they don't like electrics are the ones I want to talk to more. It's usually just because they don't understand. Like, I've done
Hmm.
car shows where, "Oh, I would never go electric," and it's like, "Why?" "Well, they're too slow." "Well, do you know the fastest car right now, production car, is electric." "Oh, well."
Hmm.
Um, but within AJAC, how long have you been a member for?
I think I'm going on my third year because I basically became a member when I started my channel. It was pretty close to the same time. So.
Okay. So, have you found in that time that, maybe when you started, there wasn't EVs weren't looked upon as the next thing and maybe you were looked down on because you kind of focused more on the EV side, or is that just what I get from the stories that I read is kind of
Hmm.
the negative side of the EVs?
No, one good thing about AJAC is that they are a very inclusive organization from a reporting standpoint, from a subject matter standpoint. They are automobile journalists, so that's the core element. And I would say, yeah, 3 years ago, there were YouTube channels out there that were doing quite well, that were ramping up, but it wasn't the norm of the medium yet. Now it very much is. So I don't think I was the first YouTuber to be on AJAC, but I was one of the earlier ones. There wasn't many when I started. Pretty well most of the journalists that were on board were coming from your traditional print sources that have been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years. So, national publications, regional publications, the print turning into digital media as well. So as websites and all the digital content grew, they were doing that. And then some have gone into the YouTube medium as well, again, because it's a very effective way at getting your ideas and opinions across. But I think I'm not the first, but I'm one of the earlier ones that was just, a small YouTube channel that wanted to make a difference to get in. And they saw that value and that I followed the guide that I follow, what they're about as well in true, honest reporting. You can argue maybe some of the journalists might be a little slanted towards internal combustion versus all electric, but remember, internal combustion has been around 100 some odd years. So this is, we're going to have a biased opinion. If that's all I've been doing for 30 years is talking about ICE cars. So, but the things are changing, and they're a very great organization for helping to promote that change. And now there are more YouTube people on over the last couple of years than, I mean, I think they've tripled the amount of journalists that are on that are strictly YouTube. So and that are bigger than a lot of them are bigger than me. So
That's that's awesome to hear that more are going towards the YouTube, just because obviously more publicity is more publicity, right?
mhm.
And the whole any publicity is good publicity isn't always true, aka Chevy Bolt and Kona.
Yeah,
Um, but
yeah.
and I guess yeah, my background is with cars and all that, so I get the guys that are all about ice. But did you have any, I guess, people or journalists, I should say, because let's be honest, you're always going to have the people that's have the negatives going around. Any pushback from your fellow AJAC members about EVs?
Not really. No, I
No?
think pretty well, and I haven't met all of them. There's quite a few. There are sometimes vendor events that we get together on. I was fortunate enough to be invited to Tech Fest last fall, which is an AJAC event where different OEMs bring in a ton of vehicles to test on a track. This is the Canadian Motorsport track just outside of Toronto here, and then you can do some driving around the area to kind of test it, and then you're a judge for the Car of the Year awards out of this. So this is an opportunity to play with the cars for a bit, and then form some sort of opinion to fill out a ballot, from a juror. So I was invited as a juror to the Tech Fest, so I was able to take some cars on the track that I normally wouldn't have access to, and a lot of the journalists there now are. Oh, I want to go take that EV out. I want to take that EV out. Whereas maybe 3 years ago they wouldn't have cared. So I think the shift is there. There are some that strictly maybe want to, pursue their efforts more into the internal combustion because there's just so much more choice and much more happening. But I think over time we will see that shift. I mean, my first show for this year was, and I still stick to that. I'm calling 2022 the year of the EV because there's so much choice coming out this year alone. Never mind what we've already got going in North America specifically that we can buy today. There's so much more, 30 plus models that are coming out to North America this year. Now, they may come out in very sparse quantities or they may already be reserved and you may not see one on a showroom this year, but it's happening. And that's unprecedented, in this marketplace to have that many new models that people can, that, are all kinds of different price ranges. It just shows that the market has really kicked in now to high gear. And I think those journalists who may have been a bit on the fence have now totally said, yeah, I got to start looking at this if I'm going to be continuing to follow the automotive market as a whole, because we're at globally plugins are about just over 8%, 8.5%. So we're starting to creep up on the market share. But again, 90% of people in the world today drive an ICE car, and 10%, let's say for argument, drive an electric. So if I'm writing something, where am I going to write? What material? Who am I going to write to? The 10% or the 90%? Right?
Yeah.
Just think of the math. So.
Well, yeah, and it's you like even with my talking to people, it's some are very um anti EVs.
Hmm.
Go with like my family lives in Alberta. There's a lot of good oil workers out there.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
so me, I've always I don't know. I can't. That's the parts I like is branching that divide, and I so yes, there I go with. There's always going to be the classic automotive journalists that have to be out there, but
Sure. Be on the boards of anything. But what I am also a member, so I kind of practice what I preach. So even though I'm doing the YouTube channel to get the word out, and with car reviews, and with my Model 3, I do some product sponsorships and stuff like that, just because people send me things. So and I do like to accessorize my vehicles. So some things I buy and I'll talk about, some things that get sent. But I also do a lot of public outreach. So I do talks, I do seminars, I do all kinds of public outreach, and I am a member of the Electric Vehicle Society of Canada. And there are different chapters across Canada. Some are named different, but we're all part of the same umbrella, which is the EV Society. And I actually opened up about a year ago a local chapter here where I live in Caledon, Ontario, just north of Toronto. So I run that chapter as well as do the YouTube stuff and everything else. And then I get contacted by organizations and people to just say, hey, our group is having a meeting, and because it's COVID, could you do a presentation about electric vehicles to our group? Because nobody really knows much about it. So I've done, especially over COVID, a lot of Zoom calls where I have this EV 101 presentation where it kind of talks about the history and where EVs came from and what they're like, and what are the why are they different than internal combustion cars, and what are the benefits, what are the advantages and disadvantages, right? Because it's not a perfect scenario, but and what this does is it provides people information to think about, maybe I can put an EV into my life, into our driveway, because maybe it'll fit for these reasons, or maybe these are my drivers. It could be financial, it could be I want torque, it could be I want quiet, it could be whatever. I don't want any tailpipe emissions. There are many different reasons people look at this. Some have multiple. So I do a lot of public outreach, and EV Society does events as well where I'll go and I'll speak, and to a crowd or whatever. So there's a lot of that going on at the same time that I'm doing my regular stuff. So yeah, pretty happy with that. And then and because I'm a Model 3, I'm a member of the Tesla Owner Club of Ontario, but I'm not like a board or anything like that. I just show up to the odd events here and there.
and maybe it's just I've seen so much of what you've been doing with the whole Zoom with EV Society with their monthly
Hmm.
meetings.
Great.
I made assumptions, and we all know what assumptions get you.
No, it's okay. Don't tell Wilf that anything about a board, because he'll come and hustle me and try to get me to join, and I just don't have the bandwidth to do that. But they're great people, great organizations, and there are many of those kind of organizations around the world, not just here in Canada. So if you're a listener in the U.S., there's Electric Vehicle, I think Association of America, or something like that. They might have rebranded. There are tons of ways that people can get involved if they want to help to get the message out.
And yeah, that's what it's all about is especially getting that message out. And have you found with your all your different mediums that you use, do you actually do any written articles with the AJAC?
I don't. I've been asked to do some blogs and stuff many times, but again, it's a bandwidth cycle issue for me. I'm
Yeah.
one man band, so the YouTube stuff, I have to think about what I'm going to film. If it's a news show, I have to put all the content together. I do script it out, so I have to put all that together. I have to film it, then I have to edit, produce it, and get it out. That with one guy with full-time job and family and stuff, it's a time consuming. I don't have the ability to do it on a regular basis. I do it how I can fit it into my life. So I don't have the bandwidth and the time to do writing. But again, I am asked to talk and to do different things within other areas that I try to help where I can, for sure.
I guess
Yeah.
I guess
Okay.
more so just have you found that with your different forms of medium that you're using, that you're finding a lot more people that are just starting to look at electric vehicles are switching over now versus when you started 3, 5 years ago type deal?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely, I think the buzz is much greater now than it was 3 years ago or so. I do get reached by people that maybe email me. Sometimes they call me if they're local, if they've met me or something at an event or whatever, and then they say, "Look, I'm seriously looking, and this is." So I ask them questions. What's your use? What are you using it for? What do you need? What's important to you? Get all that figured out. What kind of ergonomics do you need? A big vehicle, a small one? Do you have a dog and 6 kids, or what? And try to limit it down. And then I give them some advice and give them some options and models to look at. I do try to keep track of the Canadian MSRPs and what vehicles qualify for the 5K and what don't, and where they're priced at. So I can be a little bit of a guide there. I don't work for any dealers. I don't get any compensation on selling or pushing cars at all. I just do this. I give people my opinions on what they might do. And there's been some people, there was a lady on Vancouver Island that never had an EV. She had I think a Honda CR-V or no, a Toyota RAV4 for like 12 years or 15 years or something, and decided it was finally time to move to an EV and ended up getting a Model 3. And I talked to her about 6 different vehicles that fit her use case. And the Tesla was probably the weakest one out of those 6, but that's the one that she ended up liking. And it's been great for her. So I do that, and I do also supplement the video and my outreach with audio podcasts. So doing what you're doing here today, I do audio podcast shows where I get guests from literally all over the world. I did one show last week where I was interviewing a gentleman, a CTO of a company in Israel, who are developing, by the end of this decade, they're going to have a battery system that will fully charge in 5 minutes. That's their goal. So, this decade is going to see so much technological advancements, like we've seen in computers and other areas, that, EVs are going to change over time to get even better than they are today. But yeah, much more buzz now. I think many more people because they're seeing EV stuff. They're seeing commercials on the Super Bowl now about EVs, right? It's much more mainstream. It's not this little hidden, oh, you guys go hide in a corner and hug a tree kind of thing. It's much more mainstream that people are starting to get interested. And lastly, I am also a fairly regular guest on AM 640 radio here in Toronto. That I'll get on Jeff MacArthur's show once every couple of weeks or so, and we'll talk about EVs for 10 minutes and whatever stories that he picks up on. And sometimes they're non-EV related. I'm a little bit more like their auto guy almost, so they come to me for other things, and I always try to bring them back to EVs if I can. But that just helps to get the message out to people that may not know me from the other methods.
That's awesome. And I love the fact of here's the multiple choices because I don't know, talking with multiple people, everybody pushes towards Tesla.
Hmm.
Oh, you need an electric vehicle? Here, Tesla. Oh, you want a car? Tesla Model 3. Oh, you want an SUV? Model Y. Where it's here's your different choices, and I love that. Um,
Yes. I guess I was just because that's my style though, because as I said, I'm in sales, and I'm a type of sales guy that listens before I try to help. So I'll ask questions and listen to my customers, and try to understand what they're looking for, what problem are they looking to solve, whatever the case is. So I take that same style to when I'm dealing with consumers, and I'll say, like, I can recommend 20 different cars, and yeah, Tesla's one of them. But what are you looking for? What are the hot buttons for you? What are your needs? And then try to decipher that back to what's available on the EV landscape today.
yeah, there's no point of recommending a Tesla Model 3 to somebody that has a $15,000 budget type deal. But
Exactly.
have you found though with AJAC and all that, there's more people that are looking, I guess, more complaining or anything about this whole, I believe it's 2035 is when Canada, I'm not sure if it's actually gone into law yet, but where all new vehicles have to be electric. Have you found, I guess, movement in that way? More manufacturers moving that way, more journalists, I guess, on the journalistic side, if people are liking it or from the different regions not liking it? what's, I guess, going on with that?
Um, I think it's a good thing, and I think it stems obviously from our commitment as a country to meet our greenhouse gas target emissions that we agreed on in the Paris Accords and other elements. So transportation sector is one element to the overall puzzle, and consumer transportation within that sector is the largest piece of the GHG emissions. So by putting some targets in place, we need to put a plan in place in order to achieve a goal. If we just say, yeah, we want to hit this by 20, we want to be carbon free by 2050, and then that's it. We need to put steps to try to get there. Whether those steps and goals change over time, and they certainly most likely will, because of maybe we won't get to a point of having enough EVs by 2030 to fill the demand, or 2035 to stop actual selling ICE fees. We might though, who knows? Because you asked about what are manufacturers doing. Well, pretty well everybody is increasing their investments in electrification and retooling plants, building new plants, make insourcing more supply chain or forming partnerships with multiple supply chain elements in order to meet the needs of that growing market. So, people say, well, Tesla's so far ahead, and yes, because that's all they've been doing again for 10 plus years is all electrics. And it takes a while. Remember, if you draw a new car on a napkin, it takes about 5 or 6 years for that drawing on a napkin to be rolling off a production line. It's a big machine. It doesn't happen overnight. So all these investments and things that we're starting to see now come to fruition have been going on for the last few years with these OEMs. Ford just didn't decide last year, we're going to electrify the 150 and throw it out there. This has been going on for a while. And the Mustang, right? GMC Silverado. They don't just arbitrarily do these things. It takes time, effort, and money. So that's the exciting part is I think the OEMs are now all seeing it. It's what is their ability to actual execute on that and how much will they be able to execute, which is the unknown. Will GM really be able to shift their entire processing fleet to all electric by 2030 or by 2035, whatever I think is 2035 for them if they put the flag in the ground? I don't know, but they've set the goal, and it's good to have a goal to try to achieve and put those steps. So maybe that might give some of your listeners a little bit of calm, a little bit that, not like January 1st, 2036, that I can't go out and buy a Ford Ranger, ICE or whatever. That may not happen, or it may happen. It all depends. If the industry is ready there to support that, then it will happen. If it's not, then it won't happen that drastically. But this whole transition to electrification is a decades long event. It's not the Tony Sebas of the world that say by 2025 we're all driving electric cars. It's nonsense. Just look at the numbers. 70 million vehicles a year, light duty vehicles, 6.5, almost 7 million this year were EVs. I mean, that's not even 10%. We got a long way to go. And every year there's those 70 million. So the global fleet is into the couple of billion or whatever. And to change it out over time, you have to manufacture that many vehicles. And nobody is. The biggest manufacturer is making around 9 or 10 million vehicles a year right now. And that's between Toyota and VW Group. So this is a slow change that has to happen. The global fleet needs to slowly refresh out. It is going to happen, and there's lots of things being put to help make this happen. And it's very positive, and I hope your listeners can kind of get that.
The good and bad news? I would prefer to switch over tomorrow, although I also am that classic car guy. I love, the 50s trucks and all that,
Mm.
and it's like, it would be kinda sad to just not see a gas station with one of them in there. Um, what would you say would be, I guess, the most optimistic story that you've heard about, the transition to electric vehicles? Is there kinda one thing that sticks out to you that kinda has given you the most optimism that it's happening, it's in a good way?
Yeah, I would say the tipping point number two that I talk about at my EV 101 presentation is the Ford F-150 Lightning reveal. Because that really kind of hits home to so many different people, right? Much more than the Tesla Model 3 reveal did. Early adopters, tech heads, millennials that like that style. This kind of hits the working heart of countries, right? The pickup truck in general is such a versatile machine that gets used for so many different use cases. And when Ford takes a product that they've been leading in sales on for the last 40 plus years as the number one manufacturer selling that type of vehicle and electrifies it, they really have to know what they're doing, and they have to know that it's a good decision. And I think it's a great decision because to me, that now elevates the EV awareness to a much higher level and a much broader audience. And to me, that means that we're doing all the right things. Like the Mustang was the first thing. They got some flack for that. But the F-150, my goodness, don't touch that. And now that they have, everybody else is following suit. Silverado sold out their first batch in 12 minutes, over 110,000 reservations. The Dodge Ram, when it comes out, it'll probably sell out in the first, 10 minutes too. I mean, these things are happening. Rivian, all these other pickup truck manufacturers are doing well. They have a lot of business in there. So I think that we're moving at a good pace. I think it is accelerating, but just the sheer volume of how many vehicles we need to build versus how many we need to get out of the global fleet operations, like what's out there. It's such a huge number that it just has to take time. There's nothing we can do about it. We're not building 50 or 70 million EVs a year to replace one for one today, right? And I don't see that happening this decade. So this whole transition has to take some time. But the sooner we start, and we have started, the sooner we can get those emissions out of the atmosphere, because time is helps as well. The sooner we can take things out, the better it's going to be for the long term. And just look at numbers when we were in the lockdowns, how much even that short time that the climate actually bounced back, a little bit in a positive manner, right? Climate, I say, as a general term. So I think we can make a big impact, but it is going to take time.
Yeah, and it's definitely, maybe it's my more optimistic side of it. I look at it more like a cell phone.
Hmm.
Nobody thought they wanted it. Now it's kind of weird when you hear somebody say they have a home phone.
Yep.
Um,
I'll raise my hand to that. I'm still old school. It's just for backup, and we can hang up on telemarketers.
See where I talk to them.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to hang up, and it's probably not going to be me.
Yep.
But I do want to be appreciative of your time. So I'm going to start kind of wrapping it up.
Sure.
Is there a way, or how is best to contact you for all your different mediums? What's the best way?
All the different hats. Yeah, I mean the I'm on Twitter. That's my most active social media. So a lot of the stories I'll put on Twitter and not necessarily talk about them in shows. So you can follow me on Twitter at EVRev Show, all one word. Obviously, if you go to YouTube and search EV Revolution, I'll pop up. It's easy to find me. You can subscribe and check out the YouTube channel, EV Revolution Show. Those are the two main areas. I also do, as I mentioned, the audio podcasts, and they are stored on my RSS site called evrevolutionshow.com. Pretty easy to find. And that's just a website where I store all the audio podcasts, so you can download or listen to them from there, or they're also connected into, as yours are, iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher and Spotify and everything else. So you can search your favorite player for podcasts and search for EV Revolution Show, and I should pop up if you want to subscribe to the audio as well. Those are the major things. And then lastly, my email is evrevolutionshow@gmail.com. It's pretty straightforward. If anybody wants to email me, I love to take questions. And if somebody's looking for some advice, reach out to me, and we can connect and we can have that conversation if you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a long time coming. I've watched you since the beginning of the Model 3s.
Well,
So
thank you. I appreciate that.
I do thank you for that. And you get me through the day with your recordings, with the
Well, thank you.
podcast.
Thanks for having me on, and right back at you. Thanks for you doing what you're doing. Again, the more voices that are out there, talking about the realities of EVs and the benefits, from a more objective, unbiased approach, I think is great, and
Yeah.
that's what consumers need to hear.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I want to thank Ken for his time, all the great information, and just the great conversation about where and how AJAC is going and where he thinks the auto industry is going. Again, if you want to check out anything that Ken is doing, you can go check him out on YouTube and Facebook at EV Revolution Show. That's going to be in the show notes. And Twitter at EV Rev Show. And that's where he said he puts up the latest news and news that won't necessarily make it onto other, like the podcast or like the videos. You can even go check out his podcast. It's EV Revolution Show. Or email him at evrevolutionshow@gmail.com. And if you feel like chatting with me, you can reach me on email at truenorthev@gmail.com. You can leave a voice message at anchor.fm. Find me on Twitter at EV_North or on Facebook at TrueNorthEV. And I want to again thank Ken. It was such a great time chatting with him. And you guys have yourself a great day.